Welcome to all. I am Kishore Karthikeyan, teaching staff at AJK College of Arts and Science. Today we are going to look into the topic Introduction to Ballistics. Agenda for the session is Introduction to Forensic Ballistics, History of Ballistics, Weapon Types, their operation, Internal Ballistics, External Ballistics and Terminal Ballistics. What is Forensic Ballistics? Forensic ballistics refers to the science of firearms and projectiles in relation to the reconstruction of events leading to a gunshot injury. Aspects such as the geometry of a bullet, tract, and gunshot residue or GSR are commonly used in essence of reconstructing events causing the gunshot injury on a biological target. Proof marks. Proof marks are stamps applied to various parts of a weapon during and after manufacture to show that the weapon is safe and for use with the ammunition for which it was designed. Little bit of a history first. At the very earliest stages, we have early hand cannons. The earliest type of handguns was simply a small cannon of wrought iron or bronze fitted to a frame or stock with metal bands or leather thongs. These weapons were loaded from the muzzle end of the barrel with powder and the ball. A small hole at the breech end of the barrel, the touch hole, was provided with a pan into which a priming charge of powder was placed. On igniting this priming charge, either with a hot iron or lightning match fire flashed through the touch hole and into the main powder charge. To discharge the weapon, these early weapons could have been little more than psychological deterrence, being clumsy, so to fire and difficult to aim. In addition, rain or damp weather had an adverse effect on the priming charge, making it impossible to ignite. Second is the matchlock. This was really the first major advance in pistols as it enabled the weapon to be fired in one hand and also gave some opportunity to aim it as well. The reconstruction of the matchlock was exactly the same as the hand cannon in that it was muzzle loaded and had a touch hole covered with the priming charge. The only difference was that the match, a slow burning piece of cord used to ignite the priming charge, was held in a curved hook screwed to the side of the frame. To fire the gun, the hook was merely pushed forward to drop the burning end of the match into the priming charge. As these weapons become more sophisticated, the curved hook was embellished and took on the form of a snake and became known as the weapon's serpentine. Eventually, the tail of the serpentine was lengthened and became the forerunner of the modern trigger. Third, the wheel lock method. With the advent of the wheel lock, the lighted match used in the matchlock was no longer necessary. This important innovation in the field of firearms design made ambush possible as well as making the firearm a practical weapon for hunting. When fired from the shoulder, the wheel lock was often referred to as an arquebus from the shape of the butt, which was often curved to fit the shoulder. Another name strictly only for much heavier caliber weapons was the hackbutt, which literally means gun with a hook. This referred to a hook projecting from the bottom of the barrel. This hook was placed over a wall or some other object to help take up the recoil of firing. In its simplest form, the wheel lock consisted of a serrated steel wheel mounted on the side of the weapon at the rear of the barrel. The wheel was spring-loaded via a chain round its axle with a small key or spanner similar to a watch drum. When the wheel was turned with the spanner, the chain wound round the axle and the spring was tensioned. A simple bar inside the lockwork kept the wheel from unwinding until released with the trigger. Part of the wheel protruded into a small pan, the flash pan or the priming pan, which containing the priming charge for the touch hole. The serpentine, instead of containing a small, slow burning match, had a piece of iron pyrite fixed in its jaws. This was kept in tight contact with the serrated wheel by means of strong spring. On pressing the trigger, the bar was withdrawn from the grooved wheel, which then turned on its axle. Sparks produced from the friction of the pyrite on the serrated wheel ignited the priming charge, which in turn ignited the main powder charge and fired the weapon. Fourth, we have the flintlock method. The ignition system, which superseded that of the wheel lock, was a simple mechanism which provided a spark by striking a piece of flint against a steel plate. The flint was held in the jaws of a small vise on a pivoted arm called a cock. This was where the term to cock the hammer originated. The steel, which was called the frizzen, was placed on another pivoting arm opposite the cock, and the pan containing the priming compound was placed directly below the frizzen. When the trigger was pulled, a strong spring swung the cock in and out so that the flint struck the wheel a glancing blow. The glancing blow produced a shower of sparks which dropped onto the priming pan, igniting the priming powder. The flash produced by the ignited priming powder traveled through the touch hole, thus igniting the main charge and discharging the weapon. The flintlock represented a great advance in weapon design. It was cheap, reliable, and not overly susceptible to damp or rainy conditions. Unlike the complicated and expensive wheel lock, this was a weapon which could be issued in large numbers to foot soldiers and cavalry alike. Fifth, we have the pin-fire system. Introduced to the United Kingdom at the Great Exhibition in London in 1851 by Lafayette, the pin-fire weapon was one of the earliest true breech-loading weapons, using a self-contained cartridge in which the propellant, missile and the primer was all held together in a brass case. In this system, the percussion cup was inside the cartridge case, whilst a pin which rested on the percussion cup protruded through the side of the cartridge case. Striking the pin with the weapon's hammer drove the pin into the priming compound, causing it to detonate and so ignite the main propellant charge. The pin, which protruded through the weapon's chamber, not only served to locate the round in its correct position but also aided extraction of the fired cartridge case. Calibers available in the pin-fire revolvers were 5, 7, 9, 12 and 15 mm, while shotgun and rifle ammunitions in 9 mm and 12 bore and various other calibers are also available. The really great advance in pin-fire system was, however, not just the concept of self-contained cartridge but obturation, the ability of the cartridge case under pressure to swell and so seal the chamber, preventing the reward escapes of the gases. 6. We have the rim-fire system. Whilst the pin-fire system was a significant step forward, it did not have a number of drawbacks, not least of which was the propensity of the cartridge to discharge if dropped onto its pin. This problem was all but eliminated by the rimfire, which, like the pinfire, was exhibited at the Great Exhibition in 1851. The rimfire cartridge is a thin-walled cartridge with a hollow flanged rim. Into this rim is spun a small quantity of a priming compound. Crushing the rim with the firing pin causes the priming compound to explode, thus igniting the propellant inside the case. The initial development of this system was made by Paris gunsmith Flaubert, who had working examples of it as early as 1847. 7th, we have the center fire system. This was the great milestone in weapon and ammunition development. In center fire ammunition, only the primer cup needed to be softly enough to be crushed by the firing pin. The cartridge case could thus be made of a more substantial material which would act as a gas seal for much higher pressure than could be obtained with rimfire ammunition. Rocket-propelled bullets, the gyrojet, caseless ammunition, harder ignition, and many other esoterica have come and gone. However, for simplicity, reliability, and ease of manufacture, the center fire system, ignition system in an obturating cartridge case has not been excelled. 8. Rifling. Rifling is the term given to the spiral grooves cut into the bore of a barrel which impart a stabilizing spin to the bullet. The spin keeps the bullet traveling in a point-first direction and lessens any tendency for it to depart from its straight line of flight. As such, this was a very significant event in the evolution of firearms. Both straight and spiral forms of rifling are encountered in weapons and early weapons, although it is generally accepted that the straight form of rifling was to accommodate the fouling produced in these early black powder weapons. The number of grooves encountered can be anything from a single deeply cut rifling right up to the 12 in number. The form of the groove also varies, with square, round, triangular, ratchet and even Kamash shapes being encountered. The actual number of grooves appears to have little effect on the stabilizing effect of the rifling. One of the problems encountered with the muzzle loading rifle was the difficulty experienced in loading the projectile. If it was of sufficient diameter to take up the rifling, a large mallet was required to force it down the bore. If, on the other hand, it was of reduced diameter to assist in its insertion, the gases produced on firing could escape past the bullet, leading to reduced velocity. In addition, the bullet took up little of the rifling and thus became unstable in flight. The Burnsvik rifle overcame this problem by having a belted bullet and a barrel with 2 grooves to exactly match the rib of the bullet. Several other designs were tried in which the bullet was rammed down onto the various projections inside the breech end of the barrel. These projections deformed the bullet, thus filling out the bore. Unfortunately, the deformation was irregular and led to erratic behavior of the bullet. The invention of breech loading weapon eliminated the problems of having to expand the bullet and fill the bore. The bullet could be made of the correct diameter and could simply be inserted into the rifling at the breech end of the barrel. In addition, instead of deep grooving and a long soft bullet necessary for easy loading and expansion at the breech of a muzzle loader, shallow grooves and hard bullets could be used. This configuration resulted in more uniform bullets, higher velocities, better accuracy and improved trajectory. Rifling twist rate calculation. One of the first person to try to develop a formula for calculating the correct rate of twist for firearms was George Greenhill, a mathematics lecturer at Emmanuel College of Cambridge, England. His formula is based on the rule that the twist required in calibers equals to 150 divided by the length of the bullet in calibers. This can be simplified to twist is equal to 150 multiplied with D2L, where D denotes bullet diameter in inches and L denotes bullet length in inches. This formula had limitations but worked well up to and in the vicinity of about 1800 feet per second. For higher velocities, most ballistic experts suggesting substituting 180 for 150 in the formula. Ninth, we have the revolver. A revolver is a weapon with a revolving cylinder containing a number of firing chambers, basically a revolving magazine, which may be successively lined up and discharged through a single barrel. In the long history of revolvers, no name stands out more strongly than that of the Samuel Colt. The earliest forms of revolver include a snap house revolver made in the days of King Charles I, said to have been made before 1650, and an even earlier weapon made during the reign of Henry VIII, sometime before 1547. Those early revolvers were surprisingly enough practically identical to the actions covered in Colt's early patents. The action for those early patents are still in use today in the Colt single action army or frontier models. Colt's original patent dated 1835 dealt with the revolving of the cylinder by a ratchet and ball arrangement. The original patents belonging to Colt were so tightly worded that no other manufacturer had any real impression on the market until the original patents ran out in 1850. 10th, we have self-loading pistols. The principle of the self-loading pistol was grasped long ago, but without the necessary combination of a self-contained cartridge, smokeless propellant and metallurgical advances, it was not possible to utilize the principles involved. It is reported in Witch's History of the Royal Society for 1664 that a mechanic had made a claim of being able to make a pistol which could shoot as fast as presented and stop at will. The first commercially successful design was by an American, Hugo Borchardt. Unable to finance his design, he took it to Germany to have it manufactured there. This weapon, although clumsy, was of radical design, containing the first magazine to be held in the grip. And the knee joint toggle locking system, it was the design which was slightly modified by Luger to become Germany's first military self-loading pistol. Weapon types and their operation. Terrible confusion exists as to what is a pistol, revolver, a self-loading pistol and automatic. This is very basic firearms nomenclature, but it is often wrongly applied. The use of the correct term is absolutely essential if any credibility is to be maintained. First, handguns. There are three basic types of handgun, which are single shot, revolving and self-loading pistols. In English nomenclature, all handguns are pistols, some are single shot pistols, others are revolving pistols, and the rest are self-loading pistols. A true self-loading pistol will, after firing, eject the spent cartridge case, then reload a fresh round of ammunition into the chamber. To fire the fresh round, the pressure on the trigger has to be released and then reapplied. Single shot. The vast majority of single shot pistols are 0.22-inch long rifle calibers and are intended for target use. Generally, the barrel is hinged to the frame with some locking mechanism to keep it in place during fire. On unlocking, the barrel swings down, allowing the empty cartridge case to be removed and a fresh one to be inserted. Revolving pistols. In a revolving pistol or a revolver, the supply of ammunition is held in a cylinder at the rear of the barrel, with each rounding having its own chamber. Cocking the hammer rotates the cylinder via a ratchet mechanism to bring a new round of ammunition in line up with the barrel. Pulling the trigger then drops the hammer, thus firing the round. This is the most simple type of revolving pistol mechanism and is called the single action mode of operation. A prime example of single action revolver is the called single action model of 1873. The other type of revolving pistol mechanism is called the double action. In this design, a long continuous pull of the trigger cocks the hammer, rotates the cylinder, then drops the hammer all in one operation. Most modern revolving pistols employ this type of mechanism, with virtually all of them having the capability of single action mode of operation as well. Self-loading pistols or SLPs. In this type of weapon, the ammunition is contained in a removable spring-loaded magazine housed within the grip frame. The barrel of the weapon is surrounded by a slide with an integral breech block which is kept into battery. That is, when the face of the breech block is up firing, with the rear tied against the breech end of the barrel in a position ready for firing. With the rear of the barrel by a strong spring, pulling back the slide allows the topmost round of ammunition, the magazine, to present itself to the rear of the barrel. On allowing the slide to move forward under spring pressure, the round is pushed from the magazine into the chamber of the barrel by breech block. This action also cocks the trigger mechanism. On pulling the trigger, the hammer drops and the round is fired, the bullet being pushed down the barrel by the expanding gases. These gases also exert an equal and opposite force on the cartridge case, which forces the slide and breech block to the rear. This ejects the spent cartridge case through a port in the side or occasionally top of the side. At the end of its rearward motion, the spring-loaded slide moves backwards, stripping a fresh round of the top magazine and feeding it onto the rear of the barrel ready for firing. Second, rifles. Rifles actions can be very roughly grouped into single shot, bolt action, and self-loading and pump action. Single shot. In single shot weapons, the barrel can be hinged to the frame, allowing the barrel to be dropped down for loading and unloading, or can have some form of breech block which either swings out, pulls back, or slides down to expose the breech end of the barrel. Bolt action. In bolt action weapons, a turning bolt slides in an extension to the barrel, which is basically the same system as in a turn bolt used to lock a door. Pushing the bolt forward brings the bolt face into the battery, which the breech end of the barrel, and cocks the striker or firing pin. Turning the bolt then locks it into the place via bolt lugs, engaging with slots in the barrel extension. Other bolt action weapons cock the striker on the opening of the bolt. Straight pull bolt actions also exist, in which the rotary motion required to turn the bolt, locking lugs into their recesses, is applied to by the studs on the bolt, which slide in spiral grooves cut into barrel extension. Bolt action weapons are generally magazine fed either by a tubular magazine under the barrel through the buttstock or via a box magazine under the bolt. Self-loading rifles. Self-loading rifles are, with the exception of the lowest power weapons, of the locked breech type. These are generally very similar to those used in locked breech pistols, but of much stronger design to cope with higher pressure involved. Pump action. In pump action weapons, sometimes also referred to as slide action, a breech block is attached via operating rods to a movable forend. On pulling back the forend, the mechanism locking the breech block to the barrel is released by pulling the forend to rearmost extent of its travel, then pushing it forward. The empty cartridge case is ejected, a fresh round is loaded into the chamber, and the action is cocked. Shotguns. Shotgun actions are basically the same as those found in rifles, with single and double shot weapons with barrels hinged to the frame for loading and unloading. Bolt action, self-loading, and pump action. Barrels can be either positioned one on top of the other, over and or superposed or side by side. In the smaller calibers, that is 0.22 inches, 9 mm and 0.410 inches, double-barreled short pistols are occasionally encountered. Submachine guns, SMGs. SMGs are fully automatic weapons, generally chambered or for pistol caliber ammunition. The simplest type of action encountered in a simple blowback to overcome the problems of a cartridge exiting the chamber before the pressure have dropped to safe levels. A very heavy reciprocating bolt and a large spring are employed to delay the cartridge extraction. The classic example of this type of action is the Sten gun used by the British forces in World War II. Machine guns and heavy machine guns. These are well outside, but basically a machine gun is long barreled automatic weapon firing rifle caliber ammunition. A heavy machine gun is very similar to a machine gun, but it is much more sturdily built, over with a water jacket around the barrel to prevent overheating and a consequential rapid rate of wear. Being much heavier, it is generally mounted on a sturdy tripod and is designed for sustained high rates of fire. Next topic, internal, external and terminal ballistics. There are basically three types of ballistics: internal, external and terminal. Internal ballistics is a study of what happens within the barrel of a weapon from the moment of firing pin hits the primer to the time of the bullet exits from the barrel. It is mainly concerned with propellant pressures, acceleration of missile, while it is in the bore, muzzle velocity and recoil. Esoteric considerations such as primer ignition time, primer pressure or time curves and temperature also comes within the general subject matter of interior ballistics. External ballistics deals with the flight of the bullet from the muzzle of the weapon to the target. This is truly a terribly complicated subject involving parameters such as bullet shape, sectional density, atmospheric pressure, and even in large caliber weapons, the rotation of the earth. With the advent of powerful personal computers, this subject has, however, now come within the realms of the average person, which took hours of complex calculation and reference to the books of flight time tables can now be achieved in few moments. Terminal ballistics deals with the behavior of missile once it reaches the target. This is obviously not concerned with the simply piercing of a paper target, but what the missile does once it encounters a material considerably denser than air. While this will usually be concerned with the missile's performance and wounding capabilities in animal tissues. This could also include its performance in water, soil, brick, concrete, wood, or bullet-resistant materials. Introduction to internal ballistics. Internal ballistics is an enormous subject and one which many books have been produced. The mathematics involved can be highly complex and is, however, possibly to give an insight to the subject by use of few simplified equations. When the firing pin strikes the primer compound explodes with great violence, causing an extremely high temperature jet of flame to pass through the flash hole and into the propellant charge. This jet of flame, which is about 2000 degrees Celsius, ignites the propellant, which burns at high speed to form a large volume of gas. This high pressure gas accelerates the bullet down the barrel and out of the muzzle. Nitrocellulose propellant will, and if ignite in an unconfined space, gently burnt. If it is in a confined space, the heat and pressure will accelerate the rate of combustion exponentially. Factors affecting firing of the weapon. In a weapon, the propellant is confined with the cartridge case, the mouth of which is closed with the bullet. The round of ammunition is then supported by the chamber walls and standing breech of the weapons. Under these conditions, the pressure built up will continue until it is sufficient to overcome the inertia of the bullet and start its acceleration down the bore. The heavier the bullet, the greater the resistance and the higher the pressure. The higher the pressure, the greater the rate of combustion. Cartridge case capacity. Another factor affecting the rate of combustion is the density of the propellant loaded. That is the ratio of case volume to propellant volume. The greater this ratio, that is the larger the unfilled space in the cartridge case, the slower the initial rate of combustion. Internal pressure, when the propellant burns, the majority of it turns into gas, mainly comprising carbon dioxide and water vapor. At first, the gases are contained completely within the cartridge case and the pressure is exerted equally on the base of the cartridge, its walls and the base of the bullet. Once the bullet starts to move, the volume filled by the gases increases and the pressure starts to fall. Recoil. This considers the forces acting on a fired weapon which cause a handgun to either gently rotate in the hand or violently bite into the palm, or a rifle to gently push against one's shoulder or produce a bone bruising kick. Recoil is probably one of the most misquoted subjects in the field of firearms, and a basic knowledge of forces involved and how the vectors are calculated is a distinct asset for anyone in the field of forensic firearms examination. During the firing of a weapon, the pressure on the inside of the cartridge case acts not only on the base of the bullet but also on the standing breech of the weapon. It is this mechanism which causes the pistol, rifle or the shotgun to recoil. By knowing the pressure produced and the weight of the bullet, the recoil energy can be calculated. Time of bullet in the barrel. It is possible with some fairly simple mathematics to approximate the length of the time of the bullet will be in the barrel. Velocity, using the example of a 0.45 inches self-loading pistol, once again with a chamber pressure of 14,000 pounds per square inch. The actual pressure on the base of the bullet equates to 2,225 pounds, as the base is only 0.45 inches in diameter according to Newton's law of motion. Velocity is equal to the force in pounds divided by the mass. Mass is the weight of the object divided by the acceleration acting upon it due to gravity. That is 32.17 feet per second, or in round numbers 32. This is given by V is equal to F divided by M multiplied with T, where V is the velocity, F is the force in pounds, T is the time during which the force acts, and M is the mass of the object. Also, if the force is allowed to act through a distance rather than a given length of time, the velocity will be V is equal to root of 2 times F S divided by M, or V square is equal to 2 times Fs divided by M, where S is the length of the barrel, F is the force in pounds, M is the mass of the missile, and V is the velocity. External ballistics. External ballistics is the study of missiles' flight from when it leaves the muzzle until it strikes the target. It is extremely complicated subject, and before the advent of powerful desktop computers, the calculations were laborious and time-consuming, requiring the use of many mathematical tables. With modern computers and ballistic programs, it is now possible to calculate the most complex trajectory equations with just a few keystrokes. The two main factors which affect the performance of a bullet on leaving the barrel are air resistance on its nose and the effect of gravitational pull of the earth. As a result of these forces, the bullet will on the leaving the barrel describe a downward curved path or trajectory. The exact shape of this trajectory can be predetermined by knowing the gravitational effect, the muzzle velocity, the angle of elevation of the barrel, the sectional density of the bullet, and the bullet shape. The rate of fall can easily be determined by using the formula H is equal to half times G T square, where H is equal to the drop of the missile, G given to the gravity, which is 32.1725 feet per second, T is equal to time in seconds. Thus, a bullet would have dropped 1 feet below the line of flight in 0.25 seconds of flight, and 4 feet in half a second, and 16 feet in 1 second. The drop is of course totally independent of the velocity and weight of the bullet. All bullets, no matter whether they are traveling at 200 or 4000 feet per second, will drop 4 feet in 1/2 a second of flight. The only difference being that the 4000 feet per second bullet travels much further in half a second than that of a bullet which is only going at a speed of 200 feet per second. It is obvious, however, that the bullet does not continue at the same velocity throughout its flight. Air pressure on the nose of the bullet causes resistance which gradually reduces its velocity. The difference in air resistance is referred to in ballistics as in the form factor and is given by the symbol I. Maximum range of missiles. The instant the missiles leaves the barrel of a weapon, gravity starts to act and it will accelerate towards the ground at a speed of 32.17 feet per second or 9.8 meters per second. The maximum range which a missile will obtain when fired is dependent upon the elevation of the barrel, the bullet shape, and the initial velocity. The computations to accurately determine the external ballistics of a missile are exceedingly complicated, but there are few approximations and rough calculations which will give figures of sufficient accuracy for use in normal crimes in examinations. Other influencing factors include, in addition to the air resistance and gravity, there are other forces which influence the flight of the bullet. Wind will cause the bullet to drift with it in proportion to the wind direction and velocity. Thus, a wind blowing from the right of the bullet will cause it to drift to the left. Rear winds will have an increasing effect on the velocity, and nose winds a decreasing effect. Terminal ballistics. Terminal ballistics is the study of missile penetration in solids and liquids. It can be subdivided into penetration potential, which is the capability of a missile to penetrate various materials, and wound ballistics, which is the effect of the missile has on living tissues. The misinformation surrounding these two subjects is staggering. It is therefore extremely important to have an overview of the main concepts surrounding these topics and a basic understanding of the mechanism involved. Penetration potential. The penetration of various materials can be of great assistance in the investigation of shooting incidents. It is also of considerable general interest if for no other reason than to show how often the movie makers and novel writers making appalling blunders. In the past, one of the standard tests performed to assess bullet and cartridge performance was the penetration of pine boards of various thicknesses. This, as with any other type of penetration test, is plagued with inaccuracies. Just for reference, in the sake of interest, some indicators of the penetrative powers of various types of ammunition are mentioned in the background. 0.22 inches lead air gun pellet requires a minimum of 250 feet per second velocity to penetrate fresh human skin. 0.22 inches lead air gun pellet at 450 feet per second speed will make a hole in but not penetrate 1.1 by 4 inches plate glass. 0.22 inch lead air gun pellet at 600 feet per second will penetrate 1 by 4 inch plate glass. 158 grams, 0.38 inches special, plain and 0.357 inches magnum semi-jacketed bullets will penetrate both sides of a human skull. 0.78 inches spine boards for various pistol calibers. 0.22 inches LR 5 boards, 0.32 inches AZP 5 boards, 0.38 inches SNW revolver 5 boards, 0.38 special 7 boards, 9 mm PB pistol 9 boards, 0.45 inches ACP 7 boards. Generally, wound ballistic concepts are of three concepts generally held by the most of the effect of a bullet striking a human being. The first is that the bullet drills its way through, leaving a small entry and an equally small exit hole. The second is that the bullet leaves a small entry hole and an enormous exit hole. The third is that when someone is shot by anything other than an air rifle, the impact is enough to lift the person off his feet and send him flying through the air. With extremely high velocity missiles in excess of 3000 feet per second, there is an explosive movement of the tissue away from the wound track. This results in enormous temporary cavities as well as extensive fracturing to bones and damage to veins and arteries in the immediate vicinity. In addition, there is often a backsplash of tissue out of the entry hole, giving the impression of an exit wound. The second misconception, that the entry hole is always small and the exit hole is always large, is a major factor in interpretation of close range or suicidal wounds is called for. When dealing with high power handgun ammunition firing hollow point ammunitions, it is often the case that the entry hole is smaller than that of an exit hole. Tissue entering the hollow point cavity causes the bullet to expand in some cases. This can be increase the surface contact area of bullet by up to 200%. Not only does this increased surface area enable the missile to transmit more of its energy to the target, but it also increases the possibility of the bullet damaging a vital organ or blood vessel due to the much larger permanent cavity of the wound track. This expansion of the hollow point bullet within the tissue will, if the bullet does exit from the body, give rise to an exit hole considerably larger than that of an entry hole. The third concept, that when someone is shot by anything other than an air rifle, the impact is enough to lift the person off his feet and send him flying through the air, and is completely untrue. Other factors influencing the wound capabilities of a missile. Immediately after leaving the barrel, the bullet is in the slight unstable condition, which is due to in the main to the three factors: yaw, precision and nutation. Yaw yaw can be described as the angle between the longitudinal axis of a projectile and its line of flight as it exists before the bullet achieves full gyroscopic stability. Precessions, this is the rotational effect of the bullet about its mid-axis. Nutation, this is the progressive corkscrew motion of the bullet. This action is very similar to the wobble observed immediately after a top or gyroscope is initially set spinning and is a function of the spin rate being too great. That's all for this session. Meet you soon with the next video. Thank you.